And I think, when I was thinking about the responsibilities of the city council and of everyone, of human beings, we need to remember that what are our roles and responsibilities as human beings? What are the roles and responsibilities of the city council? It's to, in fact, be stewards, to take care of the people in your communities, to take care of the land in your communities. And so with that in mind, I would like to open this space to make it a sharing space, a caring space, a space where knowledge and wisdom live and thrive, a space where you can say what's on your mind and what's in your heart. And I'll do that with a few words to the Creator. Kachimigwich Jemnido. Thank you, Creator. Thank you for everything you've placed in our homelands that help human beings to live well. We acknowledge and honor the waters, the streams, the rivers, the lakes, and the oceans. We acknowledge and honor the animals, the plants, the birds, the fish, and all the good human beings. We thank you for the sky world. We thank you for our mother, the earth, and all the things that live beneath the surface of the earth. We thank you for all the insects and everything that help the plants to grow. We acknowledge and honor our medicines and our ceremonies. We thank you for our ability to prepare ourselves spiritually for the spirit world, for when this short physical world ends. We thank you for our ability to bring peace to one another, especially during times of trouble and anguish. We remember our friends and family who are ill, whether mentally, physically, or through addictions, and we hope they have a good day today and that they return to us soon as role models and as mentors. And we hope that good words are spoken, strong words that impact us emotionally and spiritually. And we ask that you help us reach the wisdom of our ancestors and to bring that wisdom here to this space and share it. And we remember our roles and responsibilities to live our lives with great respect for all living things. Kachimigwich, 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 Kachimigwich. I hope you have wonderful, strong meetings this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's so inspiring. It's so good. It's not just for me. It's an honor to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you once again to Knowledge Keeper Monique Menach. And now, for those who are able, please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you, merci. And please remain standing. I'm going to ask Councillor Gower now to introduce the performer of our national anthem today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my pleasure today to welcome Savannah Philpott from Stittsville. She is 14 years old and attends the Canada Montessori School, and she is a music student at URock Music School. URock opened its doors in 1997 and has taught and mentored over 2,000 young musicians in Stittsville and the surrounding areas, many of whom have gone on to successful careers as performers and music educators. Et maintenant, joignez-vous à Savannah Philpott pour l'interprétation de notre hymne national.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy son's command. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land, glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So this is our first council meeting of 2024. Bonjour et bienvenue. And over the past few days, as I'm sure many of you have as well, I've run into a few friends and colleagues, even today, who have said to me, Happy New Year. Is it too late to say Happy New Year? Is it still okay when we're 3 weeks into the new year? I don't know where you stand on the deadline for saying Happy New Year, but since this is our first council meeting of 2024, I think it is a good time for us to reflect on what has happened over the last 12 months and look ahead to our work this year. Je pense que c'est un bon moment pour réfléchir à ce qui s'est passé l'année dernière et à ce qui nous attend cette année. I'm sure that many of you are hoping I will deliver a State of the City speech lasting an hour or more. Yep, thank you, Councillor Leeper. But I'm afraid, as I did last year, I am going to have to disappoint you again with just a few brief remarks. It is hard to believe that it's been a year since I spoke at our first council meeting of 2023. But when I look back, I think we have accomplished a great deal since then. We passed not just one, but 2 city budgets. We've taken some important steps forward with our federal and provincial partners on a number of different and very important objectives. And we've made some other important decisions that will shape the future of our city, including hiring a new permanent city manager, setting our priorities for this term of council, launching a working group to find savings and efficiencies at City Hall, and taking the first step toward building an even better Lansdowne Park. I know not all of these decisions have been unanimous, but I've heard from many residents that they're pleased with the professional and respectful tone of our council as we have dealt with many difficult issues. The 2 budgets that we have adopted so far have taken a balanced, responsible, and practical approach. We've delivered on my campaign promise to keep taxes low while investing in our core services. Nous avons tenu ma promesse électorale de maintenir les impôts à un niveau bas tout en investissant dans nos services de base. We found already tens of millions of dollars in savings and efficiencies so that, like many families in our community, we are prioritizing and we are spending within our means. That has allowed us to invest even more deeply in our priority areas, including fixing our roads and sidewalks, building more affordable housing, hiring more paramedics and police officers, and building more recreation centers and parks for our residents. And it's allowed us to respect the affordability crisis that our residents are facing. Cela nous a permis de respecter la crise de l'abordabilité à laquelle nos résidents sont confrontés. It is typical to start a new year with hope and optimism, and I'm sure all of us have a renewed energy to do our work and deliver results for the people of Ottawa. But we have to acknowledge that not everyone in our community is feeling optimistic right now. I've spoken to many residents in recent weeks who are starting the year more concerned than ever about rising costs. Many of them are struggling to make ends meet. There is a lot of anxiety about interest rates, about inflation, about economic uncertainty. Many people are worrying about the cost of rent and mortgage payments and the price of food. That's the experience of our residents right now. And we must continue not just to respect that, but to respond to it. C'est ce qui vivent nos résidents à ce moment précis et nous devons continuer non seulement à respecter cette réalité, mais aussi à y répondre. So as I look ahead to this year, I'm focused on a few important things. I intend to continue serving the needs of all residents throughout Ottawa, those who live in our rural communities and villages, our suburban neighborhoods, and our urban core. I intend to continue respecting the financial pressures that our residents are facing and ensure that we are not adding to their burden with significant increases in taxes and fees. I intend to continue to work collaboratively with each and every one of you, as I have since this term of council began, so we are always putting our residents first. I intend to ensure we are building more homes and investing in much-needed infrastructure to support this growth. I intend to continue to bring a balanced, responsible approach to our work. J'ai l'intention de continuer à apporter une approche équilibrée et responsable à notre travail. We have a lot of important initiatives this year, including the Rural Summit, the pilot project for an alternative response for mental health calls, and in some important progress on building recreation facilities and improving our infrastructure, including roads and sidewalks, recreation centers, and parks. And we've already started to work on the 2025 budget. As I've said before, the 2025 budget includes significant pressures. They will make the 2025 budget the most difficult that we have had so far in this term. But we must continue to bring the balanced, responsible approach that we have employed so far, investing in our core services and greatest priorities while keeping taxes as low as possible for our residents. So I encourage all of us to continue working effectively and collaboratively together on behalf of the people of Ottawa. Let's continue the balanced approach that has brought us this far. Let's keep Ottawa affordable for everyone. And with that in mind, I want to take this opportunity to share some very good news today. After some very productive negotiations with our federal partners, I'm very pleased to share that I have signed an agreement for funding from the Housing Accelerator Fund. The full details of this significant investment for our city will be provided in a formal announcement in the coming days. But I wanted to share the news today that we have an agreement. This funding will greatly amplify our efforts to build affordable housing and streamline the planning approval process. Ce financement permettra d'amplifier considérablement nos efforts pour construire des logements abordables et de simplifier le processus d'approbation des plans. I want to thank our local members of parliament, the MPs from the Ottawa area, who have been working very hard on behalf of Ottawa to secure this funding. I also want to thank Housing Minister Sean Fraser and the Prime Minister for their collaboration throughout this process. Again, I'm looking forward to a more formal announcement in the near future at which all of the details will be shared. This is excellent news for our city. But our work doesn't stop there. We must continue to work hard to secure the support we need from other levels of government. This is one of my biggest goals for 2024. We need the help of both the federal and provincial governments so we can make Ottawa truly a better, safer, and more affordable city for everyone. And with that, let's get started on our work today. I will ask the Deputy Clerk to do the roll call. Merci.
Councillor Luloff.
Je suis présent.
Councillor Dudas. I'm here. Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Ici.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Johnson.
Ici.
Councillor Devine.
Ici.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Plante.
Ici.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Councillor Leeper.
Ici.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor DeRose.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor DeRoche.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Merci. Confirmation of minutes from the council meeting of the 6th of December. Is that carried? Declarations of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Councillor Johnson.
I, Councillor Lane Johnson, declare a potential deemed indirect pecuniary interest on the following items on the council agenda of January 24th, 2024. Item 1, Item 14.6, application to alter 29 Russell Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, located in the Russell Avenue Range Road Heritage Conservation District. And number 2, item 15.1.2, zoning bylaw amendment 29 Russell Avenue, as my spouse has a financial relationship with the owners of the properties.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest? Okay, I'll note the communications received from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and the other communications received as well. There were no regrets. So if I could have a motion to introduce reports, Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. That Built Heritage Report 10, Planning and Housing Committee Reports 18A and 20, and the report from the city clerk entitled, quote, Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for Items Subject to the Planning Act, Explanation Requirements at the City Council meeting of December 6, 2023, end quote, be received and considered.
Is that carried? All right, item 12 is the Built Heritage Committee. Item 12.1 is the application to alter 359 Kent Street, 436 and 444 McLaren Street. Is that carried? 12.2, application to alter 125 Lakeway Drive. Is that carried? Item 23 is an application to alter 149 King George Street. Is that carried? Item 12.4 is the designation of 415 Kenwood Avenue. Is that carried? Item 12.5 is the designation of Bible House at 315 Lisgar Street, and I understand there's a motion.
Right now.
Okay, there's just an amending motion on that we can deal with quickly, I think. Councillor Trosper?
Yes, this is just because a couple of the citizen members of the Built Heritage Committee wanted to include some additional attributes in the designation. So whereas report titled Designation of Bible House at 315 Lisgar Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act was carried to Built Heritage Committee on January 16, 2024. And whereas members of the Built Heritage Committee suggested additional attributes to be included in the Statement of Cultural Heritage, and whereas the inclusion of the additional heritage attributes strengthens the report seeking to designate this property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, therefore be it resolved that document 5 in report ACS 2024-PRE-RHU-0014 be replaced with the amended document 5 version attached.
Okay, is that carried? And the original item is amended. Is that carried? Item 12.6 is the designation of Southminster United Church at 1040 Bank Street. Is that carried? 12.7 is the designation of former W.C. Edwards and Company Building 290 City Center Avenue. Is that carried? 12.8 is the designation of the Westboro Masonic Temple at 430 Churchill Avenue. Is that carried? Moving to Planning and Housing Committee Report 18A. Item 13.1 is an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 359 Kent Street, 436 and 444 McLaren Street. And I believe there is a technical amendment for that. Councillor Troster?
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas report ACS 2023-PRE-PS0123, the report recommends amending the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw to permit a landmark building of 27 stories with a privately owned public space at 359 Kent Street, 436 McLaren Street, and 444 McLaren Street. And whereas report recommendation 1B unintentionally omitted reference to the proposed urban exception and proposed schedule from the details of recommended zoning. And whereas the details of recommended zoning in document 3 seek to add an urban exception to section 239 of the zoning bylaw. And whereas the date of council's approval of this bylaw would be January 24, 2024. Therefore, be it resolved that council amend Planning and Housing Committee Report 18A, Item 1, Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment 359 Kent Street, 436 and 444 McLaren Street by 1, replacing recommendation B with the text, an amendment to the zoning bylaw number 2008-250 for 359 Kent Street, 436 and 444 McLaren Street as shown in document 1 as detailed in document 3 and document 4, and 2, replacing the text section 349 in document 3, section 3 with the text section 239. 3, replacing the text as in document 3, section 3C with the text add, and replacing the text as of the date of council approval in document 3, section 3C, bullet 16 with the text as of January 24, 2024, and replacing the text as of the date of council approval in document 3, section 3C, bullet 18 with the text as of January 24, 2024. And therefore be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to section 3417 of the Planning Act as amended. Any objections?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Troster. Is that technical amendment carried? And the item is amended, is that carried? Thank you. Moving to item 14, the Planning and Housing Committee Report 20. Item 14.1, I know there's a motion related to that, or perhaps more than one, so we'll hold that. Item 14.2 is zoning bylaw amendment for 1592 10th Line Road. Is that carried? 14.3 is zoning bylaw amendment for 225 Cope Drive and 166 Shellwright Street. Is that carried?
And dissent.
14 A dissent from Councillor Capano? Okay, thank you. Item 14.4 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 3750 North Bowesville Road. Is that carried? Oh, there's a technical amendment on that? Okay. Who's moving that? Councillor Brockington, technical amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. Technical amendment moved by myself, seconded by the Chair of Planning, Councillor Leeper. Whereas the report recommends amending the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw to permit 2 14-story towers in a residential building at 3750 North Bowesville Road. And whereas report recommendation 1 unintentionally omitted reference to the zoning schedule in document 2, whereas the details of the recommended zoning in document 3 unintentionally omitted a provision to add the proposed zoning schedule to part 17 of the zoning bylaw. Therefore, be it resolved that Council amend Planning and Housing Committee Report 20, Item 5, Zoning Bylaw Amendment 3750 North Bowesville Road by the following. 1, replace the committee recommendation with text, quote, that Council approve an amendment to the zoning bylaw number 2008-250 for 3750 North Bowesville Road, as shown in document 1 as detailed in document 2 and document 3. And number 2, adding the following text as section 3 of document 3, details of recommended zoning. And 3, add document 2 to part 17 of the zoning bylaw as schedule YYY. And therefore be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to section 3417 of the Planning Act.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Is the technical amendment carried? It's just to confirm that it's supported by staff, yes? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, just Mr. Mayor, I understand that planning, real estate and economic development are supportive of this motion and drafted it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is that carried? And the item is amended is carried? Okay. Item 14.5, waiver of demolition control at 185 Montreal Road. Is that carried? Item 14.6, which is the item for which I believe Councillor Johnson had a conflict, is that application to alter 29 Russell Avenue, is that carried? Okay, moving to item 15, the bulk consent agenda. Because of the declaration on item 15.1.2, the zoning for 29 Russell Avenue, we'll vote on that separately without Councillor Johnson. Is that carried? And then the rest of the bulk consent agenda, is that carried? Okay. So let's move back to item 14.1, which is the memorandum of understanding with Catassa Group. And I understand there is a motion from Councillor Carr. Would you like to introduce that now?
Thanks. I just needed a refresher on procedure since it's been a few weeks. I'll read the motion in first and then I'll speak to it if that's okay. Whereas a number of formats for community benefits agreements have been used by the City of Ottawa over the last years in the case of voluntary donations and other community benefits, including social contracts developed for Heron Gate development and subsequently for Manor Parks estate development. And whereas voluntary contributions have been advanced by ward councillors and staff for other developments despite the absence of a policy framework governing such contributions. And Whereas interpretations from the Integrity Commissioner to councillors have indicated that the provision of voluntary donations for community benefits is a policy matter. And whereas the City of Ottawa's existing donations to the City of for community benefit policy does not specifically address such developer contributions or provide guidance to members of council. And whereas other municipalities, including Toronto, have established a policy to provide a framework for voluntary donations for community benefits. Therefore, be it resolved that an updated policy framework for voluntary donations for community benefits be developed in order to ensure consistency of approach and application, to improve transparency with the prescribed delegated authority for the allocation of resources, and that the policy include a toolkit and scripts to help bring uniformity and clarity to these discussions for all parties. And be it further resolved that consultation with the development industry be included and that this policy be presented as part of midterm governance report for council's consideration. And I'll just speak briefly to it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to put this forward as I think that it's timely to have a discussion in light of this voluntary agreement. On the surface, it bears all of the hallmarks of what is typically referred to as a community benefits agreement, whereas it's a legal agreement designed to address community concerns, in this case, those related to traffic and affordable housing as part of the development process. I don't see it as very different to the social contract that was negotiated with respect to the Herongate development and ensured that there was no future displacement of evicted tenants by offering the same rent in new units and a percentage of average affordable housing through average market rates to be developed as affordable, as well as commitments to green space, better recreation and community services and others. At the time, it was heralded as potentially a blueprint for future agreements, was subsequently used as a basis for Manor Park, where the developer Manor Park Estates voluntarily transferred leases to avoid evictions. Yet recently, when discussing Lansdowne Park, the staff recommendations on Councillor King's motion to put forward a community benefits agreements was that we could not do so as there is already a provincial legislation in place. I think community benefits should extend beyond what is allowed in legislation, as it primarily community-based. I understand that there's a conflict that exists with legislation, but I think it's important that we have a community benefits policy so it's understood well what can and cannot be done. Until 2 days ago, I wasn't aware that Ottawa even had a community benefits donation policy. It's not publicly posted. It was passed last term of council with respect to the donation of the playground at Mooney's Bay, but this was before the passing of the changes to Section 37 to community benefits after Herongate and subsequently Manor Park. It's obvious that other stakeholders are also unaware we have a policy, as the letter we just received from Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association alludes only to the Toronto policy on community benefits. I think it's long overdue. We have a policy in place that doesn't conflict with provincial policy. To better understand how we can best work with community groups and developers, roles and responsibilities need to be clear, particularly important as we grapple with the need for affordable housing and equity issues and better understand our roles.
Okay, thank you. I understand Councillor Curry also has a motion, so if you want to introduce that now, and then we can have discussion on that, on all of this. And if you're okay, Councillor Hill, we'll go to you after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my motion reads as be it resolved that the committee recommendation be amended to provide for the voluntary contributions received through the MOU with Katasa Group to be allocated as follows. $100,000 for citywide traffic calming for allocation under the discretion of the General Manager of Public Works, and $200,000 for citywide affordable housing under the discretion of the General Manager of Community and Social Services. And be it further resolved that until such time as Council considers a new policy framework for voluntary contributions through the midterm governance report, any future voluntary donation agreements with developers that may come forward be allocated on a citywide basis under delegated authority of the respective General Manager. So, Mr. Mayor, just to introduce this and explain it, I really hope that this is seen for what it actually is, which is an attempt to try to help all of us in these complicated situations. So I'd like to thank the councillor from the Glebe who put forward the motion originally at Planning Committee a couple of months ago that actually brought this to light in a very transparent way, that there was $300,000 on a voluntary contribution that he had worked hard and worked with developers to get. And the challenge is that all of us have done not exactly the same thing, but very similar things, whether it's just a sign in your ward or if it's an extra addition to a little pathway or something that you talk to a developer about. But the challenge is working hard with a developer or working hard for your community can be seen as a conflict. And when you are a member of Planning Committee and you have done this type of work, myself included, former Canada North City councillors included, potentially all of you included, as I've had so many of you come to me and talk to me about situations in your ward where you've worked with a developer and now you're wondering if that's a problem.
or you've done something wrong. Originally you were not doing anything wrong. You were trying to work for your community with a developer to get something better out of the development. So I really hope people understand what's happening here is that if this then is given to staff as delegated authority, then it potentially relieves us of a conflict until we have a policy in place. Once we have a policy in place, then all of us will know how to act and how to behave and how to work with developers for the benefit of our communities. So that is the intention of this. But Mr. Mayor, I don't know if this is the moment in time right now, but I would like to ask staff, if this is the case that they were given delegated authority to look at this money and determine what should be done, but yet we have a letter from the Catassa Group's lawyer that said they fully intended this to go to this ward because of the problems that happened there, right? I had a very similar case in Canada. So given that we have a letter from the lawyer saying, we really wanted to help this community because of what we put them through, but to get rid of any conflict, we give that to staff as a delegated authority. They have authority to figure out what happens with this money. Would staff not take that into consideration and in the end direct it to the ward where it was actually originated from?
Thank you, Councillor, for the opportunity to speak to this. I'm going to ask probably Vivi and Clara also to speak to it. But I think in terms of overall priority, we would look at the priorities across the city and the needs to determine where the investment can be best made and where we can pool the funds to make an investment or advance something. And I speak specifically of housing, where we can make use the best funds to advance a project that could be shovel ready. And I'll just ask Clara if she could jump in and speak to that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We would certainly follow whatever policy council approves. And just a reminder that all of our affordable housing pipeline projects do come forward to council as part of our affordable housing capital plan. So that funding would likely be being then integrated into the affordable housing capital plan for approval at council.
Okay, so I mean, what I was trying to get at was if the lawyer's letter indicated that the intention of the Catassa Group was simply to help the community out where they had created a lot of angst, would staff not take into consideration that kind of direction based on who was given the voluntary contribution, even though this motion asks staff for delegated authority for citywide? Once it's citywide, it still can be allocated to a particular location.
Absolutely, Councillor.
Thank you, because my challenge is it's better to have it done that way than have the councillor do that, right? The councillor is in charge of voting on committees, right? And in this role, there's so much opportunity for optics to make it seem as if councillors are doing things that they are really not doing. So to me, this is a very safe way to do this instead of having a councillor try to advocate and get things and pressure potentially optically a developer, and that's not a good thing. So anyway, that's the intention of this motion. I hope it is seen as that and not as anything other than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm a believer in working with all of our stakeholders in order to make the community improvements that we need, but I do have a number of concerns about the Troster motion for the $300,000 Catassa donation. First, I'm concerned that this does not pass the public transparency test. To be clear, our integrity commissioner did not clear this project from being a potential conflict of interest. She simply highlighted that negotiating voluntary contributions from developers is a policy matter. And as such, she interpreted that she is not within jurisdiction. I have a significant concern about the very concept of negotiating voluntary contributions. A negotiation implies that the interests of both parties are met with acceptable terms and conditions. In this case, the interest of the local councillor has been articulated and is being met, but that of the developer remains unclear to me. But just to be clear, I want to speak to the legal consideration in the staff memorandum on this topic. It states that the approval of the development application was not conditional on the approval of the voluntary contribution. However, if the developer's existing and future proposals then there clearly is, as the Integrity Commissioner highlighted, a policy gap regarding the perception of bias on future developments and decisions. I believe that most, if not all, of my council colleagues have expressed a concern regarding this policy gap. Our planning chair told CBC that, quote, "There's no formal policies in place to govern whether or not a voluntary contribution can be made to something that the councillor considers important." Well, let's get the policy gap closed. That's the discussion that I think we should be having. And once we've put that policy in place, that is when we should be looking at motions like the specific one that we have today. If this was $6,000 to install 2 speed boards, then the risk to the public would be much less, and I would be inclined to say, let's just carry on. However, this is $300,000. We owe it to our residents to measure first and then cut to the proper length. So I'd ask all of you a simple question. What is the rush? Why do we need to decide today that Ward 17 should get $300,000 windfall from a local developer? Do we not owe it to the public for such an atypical situation and at such a significant dollar value to be properly scrutinized and to have adequate policy coverage? The narrative to date has been that there's a separation between this voluntary donation and the approved application. So let's simply permit the current development to advance while we provide due diligence to sort out the missing policy piece in this case. Colleagues, I cannot vote in favor of this motion at this time. We lack the proper policy tools to satisfy the level of transparency that the public deserves. I do not want to rush us to a precedent despite the immediate $300,000 benefit to Councillor Menard's ward, which on the surface looks so appealing to the community, when the potential downstream consequences could in fact be setting us back in terms of impartial process, building costs, and development delays. To that end, I move that this motion be deferred back to council until a fulsome voluntary contributions policy has been developed and implemented.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. You'll need a seconder for that motion. Seconded by Councillor Luloff. Okay, Conseillère Plante.
Oui, merci beaucoup. C'était vraiment intéressant de lire ce dossier. Je ne sais pas trop de m'impliquer dans les affaires dans les autres quartiers, mais ça m'a montré qu'on a vraiment 2 expériences différentes. Évidemment, j'ai beaucoup de construction dans mon quartier, ça, c'est pas un secret, mais quand j'ai des discussions avec des développeurs et des promoteurs, c'est vraiment des questions de désordre social, des gardes de sécurité, des périmètres, comment on peut mettre des clôtures pour garder comme un minimum de sécurité dans mon quartier.
Okay.
Et quand
Excusez-moi, Conseillère Plante, I'm sorry, just as a matter of, this is on me, not you. We have a deferral motion now. So, sorry, a referral motion now. So, for clarity, I just want to make sure we understand what that motion is, and then we can follow the procedure from there. But Councillor Hill, I just want to get the details of your referral motion correct, and then we can get back to.
I'm simply asking, Mr. Mayor, that we defer this until such time that we have a proper policy in place for voluntary contributions.
Okay, so deferring it, not referring it back to planning, but just deferring the
That's
item.
right. Deferring the process.
Okay, so deferring the motion from committee, but not the motion, but not the
That's
other.
correct.
But
The
not
motion-
the other motions that were introduced today.
That's correct.
Okay. So
Thank you, Councillor Brockton.
Just to be clear, there is a motion from committee on the memorandum of understanding from Catassa Group. There's a motion from Councillor Carr. There's a motion from Councillor Curry. Councillor Hill is moving a motion to defer the motion from committee on the memorandum of understanding with Catassa Group. Not the motion from Councillor Carr, not the motion from Councillor Curry. Is that
Point of
correct?
order.
Yes.
Would Councillor Curry's motion not also be deferred because it speaks specifically to the item that we are potentially deferring?
Yeah, so would Councillor Curry's motion pertain specifically to the memorandum of
Mr.
understanding?
Mayor,
Yes.
the first portion of Councillor Curry's motion is a direct amendment to the committee recommendation. So yes, that would be impacted by the deferral and would have to be reintroduced at that subsequent meeting.
Okay. And as there is a motion for deferral, the focus of our discussion now should simply be on deferral. Is that correct? Or can we still discuss the other motion? Or
Mr. Mayor, a deferral motion is a procedural motion that takes precedence. Debate should be restricted to deferral until that matter is disposed of.
Okay. So we're now dealing exclusively with the deferral motion. So anybody who wants to speak to the deferral motion, go ahead, and then we can move on to discussing. Well, we'll see where we are after the deferral motion. Okay, Councillor Trost, Councillor Arpont, did you want to speak to the deferral motion specifically, or?
I'm not sure. Sure.
Okay.
I'm just going to continue what I had, my planned remarks. Is that okay? No?
No,
Okay.
they have to be about whether we're deferring.
I'll
the site
wait
or
then.
not.
Okay. Merci.
Okay, Councillor Troster.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not support deferring this for a number of reasons. First of all, we deferred this at committee and returned to it in the new year, and it was passed by committee. We sought a legal opinion from the city that said that it was entirely within legal bounds to have an agreement of this nature. And I put forward a direction at that committee to develop a policy for the future. But there is nothing from an ethical standpoint or from a legal standpoint that says anything is wrong with a councillor seeking greater contributions for their neighborhood. And speaking as someone from a community that has a tremendous amount of construction, very, very large developments, years of pile driving and disturbance. This is part of developers being able to demonstrate their commitment to community and understanding the pain that our neighbors go through, especially our wards that are very ripe for intensification. So I can speak more to the other motions after, but I would really rather that we deal with this now. I think it really undermines the work of Planning and Housing Committee that has considered this item twice, that sought a legal opinion and brought it forward to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Mayor. I certainly, as I weigh sort of both sides here, that there are pros and cons to both, and appreciate the discussion we're having. I just want to reiterate that the agreement that's before us was made in good faith, that both parties agreed to that agreement, and basically approving this is tied to the development going forward. So we can debate the merits of the other motions. I definitely think those matters have to be debated and would prefer that they be debated today. This is probably the most transparent, open agreement from any development that I've seen before because of the focus that we've given it both at committee and now at council. I think this should be, the agreement should be approved today, and we should debate the other motions that our colleagues have put forward. So I will not be supporting the referral.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Menard.
Yeah, just on deferral, just very quickly, contrary to what has been said, our office did meet with the Integrity Commissioner and check on this to make sure that there wasn't a conflict. Obviously, it's been through Planning Committee twice. One was in 2023, and then it came back to 2024 because there wanted to be some checking with legal, who had confirmed it several times, and the Integrity Commissioner, which also weighed in on that legal memo. We also received a letter from Kitasa, also confirming the voluntary aspect of this through their lawyer just yesterday, as well as a letter from GOBA indicating there's an individual specific voluntary contribution in this case, but that the policy should be debated in the future. So I am fully in agreement. We need a policy on this. We can have a discussion about that policy, but in this case, these voluntary contributions were negotiated, discussed before that was in place, in good faith, working towards things like affordable housing at Bank and Chamberlain, and what is a very bad Bronson and Carling intersection, and in areas that's going to see a lot more development with the new hospital and that Carling Dow's Lake area. So it's not in the Glebe, it's actually in Dow's Lake area. So I appreciate the sentiment about a policy. I think we need to get there, but in this case, there's been nothing but I think good faith discussions around this, and we need to deal with that part now, and then the other two motions as we move forward. So I'll just say that, and thanks to Planning Committee for, I think, unanimously approving this after it came back on the second time around. So thanks for the debate and discussion we had at that committee, which is where this debate and discussion should take place.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On deferral, I'll be supporting deferral because I think there are questions being raised here that I'd like to see answered. I personally don't see this as the equivalent to somebody asking for an extra 2 swings on a swing set in a park being built at the time in their ward. We're talking about a lump sum of cash, and there's no request for any kind of receipts for that cash. And that part concerns me. Like, I get it that we don't want to ruin things for when we ask companies to put up signs or to help us put on community events or whatever. I think all that has to be well within the rules. I think the Integrity Commissioner does a pretty good job about giving us advice on those things. And that's why I'm struggling with this, because most times we're told as politicians, never touch the money, never be part of the money. But here's, I hate to use the example, but here's a bag of money being put on the table and
just a quick
hand
point of
off,
order. I just want to make sure that we're discussing deferral as opposed to the substance.
Yeah,
of the
so I'm
motion.
explaining why I'm supporting deferral. Anyway, that's why I'd like to see it deferred. I'd like to see it looked more into. I have an amendment for the car motion that I'll bring up when we go back to talk to that stuff. But I really think I'm open-minded on this, but I'm really thinking we need some expert advice on how to go forward with this. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's why I'll support deferral.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be supporting deferral today. My comfort with what the councillor is seeking and bringing forward to us is such that I don't think we need more debate, but I do want to avoid talking about the substance of the motion this morning. I am aware that there is a developer who has offered to make a payment. We're not going to have a policy on voluntary contributions in the context of development applications for quite a while. Midterm governance review is significantly far away. And in the meantime, a lot of us who have a very large number of developments or in those discussions with developers on a fairly constant basis that are having an impact with respect to intensification, or having an impact with respect to loss of housing, that are having an impact with respect to traffic concerns. We want to have those discussions with developers who are willing to have those discussions, understanding that all we can do is what developers are voluntarily willing to do. I'm not willing to put those discussions aside for a year, maybe more, in light of the fact that some members may not be comfortable with the process by which these happen. I'd like to have those contributions with the developers who are willing to have them. And I think it's important, given the impact that these developments are having in my ward, that we do have those discussions. So I'm hoping we can pass the memorandum of understanding today. But I certainly don't think we need to defer it. Let's move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Luloff.
I'm supporting deferral today because this really doesn't pass the smell test. Habituellement, ce type de négociation, celle qui implique de grosses sommes d'argent, se déroule au grand jour de manière transparente. J'aimerais voir toutes les communications entre le bureau du conseiller et le développeur pour comprendre comment ce chiffre a été convenu. Je ne suis pas non plus d'accord avec le fait de donner aux conseillers et conseillères des caisses noires pour dépenser de l'argent comme cela sans contrôle du conseil. Cette somme équivaut à plus d'un budget annuel du bureau pour un conseiller. And I have it on good authority that this developer felt pressured by this councillor to make this contribution and understood that it was simply the way that we do things in Ottawa. I really don't like that implication. Il y a une grande différence entre ce que le conseiller Curry a décrit et l'obtention d'une contribution volontaire de $300,000. How can one councillor be told that the city cannot accept 2 speed boards from one developer to increase security on a street, safety and security on the street, but that we can accept a $300,000 slush fund? We desperately need a policy, and that's why we need to defer this. We also need to understand that adding $300,000 to a bill to develop will make housing more expensive in this project. If you think the developer won't just add this to the cost of housing, I've got a timeshare in the Poconos that I want to talk to you about after this meeting. I can't support this.
Mayor, point of order, sorry. The councillors insinuated something that would amount to something like extortion or bribery, in that there was some undue pressure applied, which has not been confirmed in any legal letter we've received from Katasa, and has been confirmed by the Integrity Commissioner when described by the process that
not a
we
point of order.
undertook voluntarily. So I'd ask the member to withdraw those comments, that you have it on some authority that there was pressure there, because none of that was the case in this matter.
I do not.
And if there is something like that, then I'd ask the member to put it on the table. But it really goes to, feel free to provide evidence of that, councillor, but don't say those things unless you have some evidence to back it up beyond what's been already provided to councillors in a legal letter, because it's egregious.
It's not egregious, and we're indemnified with what we say at this table. I would like to see the emails between you and the developer then. Anyway, this is not a point of order.
Okay.
I'll continue
It's
on.
a point of privilege. So let's just get back to the matter at hand of whether we're deferring or not, and let's focus on the merits of deferral rather than. Anyway, just carry on, please. Just focus on the motion, if you would.
I can't support this. We need to get a policy in place and put some sunshine on what seems to be a very shady situation. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I won't be supporting deferral, and I have to say I take incredible offense to the comments that are being made today with respect to a bag of money being put on the table. The motion very clearly articulates that $100,000 is going to traffic calming and the rest is going to affordable housing. So that is just offensive and inappropriate. But in terms of deferral, it makes no sense. This has gone through the Integrity Commissioner. It's gone through legal advice. What are we deferring until? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just adding another red tape to an incredibly already regulated process. So come on, like, let's just be sensible. The things that Councillor Menard has negotiated for his community benefit residents that we are elected to represent. And I think he's done an incredible job, and any comments that suggest that this is extortion are just completely offensive and should be withdrawn. Thank you.
Okay.
Personal privilege. The word extortion was never used in anything that I said.
Okay. Again, let's get back to the merits of deferral or not, and focus on that, please. Councillor Dudas.
I will be supporting deferral, and I'll say it's because I'm not prepared to support what is before us today. And I would like to be able to be in a place that I feel comfortable doing that. And what we don't have is a policy that gives me that confidence. And, city councilors are so often accused of being in the pocket of developers when we vote on development applications, despite the fact that the process of development applications is largely regulated by the province. I mean, I've even heard it in some of our members' own election campaign slogans. So on this file, I want to be absolutely clear. I firmly believe that the conversations that took place were above board. Okay, I'm just going to say that this product is nothing but the intent of best intentions. But I also understand that free money is hard to turn down. And with that said, I'm deeply concerned about two things: the precedent this sets and the optics for our community. So I was reading the letter from Katasa's lawyers again and again this morning, and with every single time I read it, I got even more and more uncomfortable. The letter expressly stated that this voluntary donation was made by their client for two reasons. The city has shown support by having numerous meetings with the developer, and that this file was particularly difficult. So now I'm in this position where this voluntary donation was made to the city because the city met with them and worked on a difficult file. Isn't that exactly what the city is required to do for all development files? It is literally our job. This doesn't pass any sort of smell test to me. This letter expressly states that they do not want to be making future donations like this. And that is concerning, that they even have to entrench that in their own terminology. Is this not setting a precedent
then why is it acceptable in the first place?
Just a point of order, just again, quickly, if we could get back to the merits of deferral.
The reason why we should.
Mr. Mayor, I turn to you. I'm happy to finish, or I
Okay, if you're speaking to whether or not.
I'm
you know,
explaining
why
why
you're
I
supporting
would like to
deferral.
defer.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I fall on your ruling, sir. You either listen
Well-
to me now or you listen to me later. It's your choice.
Anyway,
I'm happy
let's
to
focus.
conti-
I think you've explained why you are supporting deferral, and we'll potentially have time to talk about the merits of the proposal separately.
Okay.
So
So I'm happy to get back to this when we go back. I will support deferral because I'm not in a good place with where this is at. I don't feel comfortable with what we're being seen before us today.
okay. And just to be, I mean, there's overlap between why somebody may or may not support deferral and whether or not they support the original motion. So that's obviously why there's some latitude here. Okay, so Councillor Devine, go ahead.
First meeting of the year, huh? Mr. Mayor, I will speak to deferral, but I'm not sure, forgive me for not understanding procedure, if this is a point of order or not. But in regards to the comments you made in your opening statement about the kind of tone that has been appreciated by our residents, already I've taken a quick note of the language that we've used here that in my mind is very disrespectful of members, if not the process. Shining light on shady things, bag of money, slush fund. I have it on good authority, doesn't pass the smell test. With all due respect, if a member has it on good authority that something is different than what is stated in the letter, I would very much appreciate to see that before it be used in terms of the argument being presented. As for the actual matter itself on deferral, I will not be supporting deferral. From what I understand from other members here, other councillors have followed this practice of negotiating contributions from councillors. We've heard that the member here who is the beneficiary of this contribution has simply done an excellent job of it. And as I've also heard, been very, very transparent of it. I do support having a policy discussion on this matter where we may establish guidelines so that we may, in the full light of day with all sunshine present, make good decisions. But by voting against this MOU, which as I understand has been negotiated in good faith with a willing developer, by voting against it, we are therefore making a decision in advance of having the policy discussion. I would rather have the policy discussion and then make the decision. It seems to me that the status quo of allowing the memorandum to pass through is already established practice. But I have a question for legal. If we were to defer this decision, if we were to subject the awarding of this voluntary contribution pending what staff might make a determination, is there any risk that CATASA, seeing that their contribution may now be subject to other conditions, is there any possible risk that CATASA may say, you know what, we're going to pull this money away?
Mr. Mayor, as this is a voluntary contribution, up until such time as the memorandum of understanding is signed, they can do so.
Thank you. So in other words, by the decision that this council makes here today, a contribution which will clearly serve the neighborhood in which the property is being developed, which has been negotiated in good faith, a contribution that will go towards traffic calming and affordable housing. By the fact that we are looking to shine light here, we may risk losing that $300,000. Forgive me for repeating the same question twice, but we risk losing that, or Councilor Menard's community risks losing that money, correct?
Mr. Mayor, as I would give the same answer I did, until such time as the MOU is signed, CATASA can determine not to sign it.
Well, thank you very much. I will not be supporting deferral.
Okay, thank you. But just to be clear, they can decide not to sign and not to make the contribution for any reason they choose until they sign it and make the contribution, because it is voluntary.
And it's correct, Mr.
Thank you. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I supported the MOU at committee because of course I want to see investments in affordable housing and traffic calming, whether it's in my ward or elsewhere in the city. But my issue with this MOU from the first time it came to committee and I moved deferral was that I had a we won't go through this again because this will be the third time I'm speaking about this, but in 2021, I had a situation where a developer built speed bump was going to be delayed. And I made a request that in place of the delay, they purchase 2 speed boards, which are traffic calming tools, to address the speeding concerns in the community, until which time the speed bump could be built. I asked the integrity commissioner if this was all above board, and was told at that time that if the city were to accept the speed boards, it would be a violation of the code of conduct because I made the request. So the speed boards were never installed. I accepted her decision. So I'm confused. And my issue with what's in front of us is I feel like in the absence of a policy, that's why I wholeheartedly support Councillor Carr. I seconded the motion. We need a policy. I think everybody agrees. But in the absence of one, I feel like situations and councillors are being treated differently. And I'm uncomfortable with that. So I'm inclined to support deferral. I don't know, is the integrity commissioner on the call? I'm still unclear as to why the 2 situations were handled differently. So I could ask. I don't see her there. But that's where my level of comfort is it doesn't feel like it's being applied across the board. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kitts. Councillor Curry?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to support deferral. You can think whatever you want, but there's $300,000 here to be had. And I don't want to risk that. The MOU could be signed. And I think in my motion, I've offered an option that very likely it will go back to that ward anyway, but it will remove anyone from being in a conflict of interest. So I think there's a way forward here, which will still see a policy discussion. Maybe we just do exactly what Toronto's done and get it over with more quickly. But I still think there's a way forward here so that we do not lose this $300,000. You look at the 2 category headings for where that money could go. Both of those category headings need additional funds and always will. So I don't support deferring this any further because there's a risk that we would lose it.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Tierney?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick points that I will be supporting deferral, and it's for a couple of reasons. I think we have a lot more questions than answers since we've seen some of the IC's feedback, how this could play out as some kind of precedent in the future. I guess a question to our legal staff. If we were to outright reject the application period, they would obviously go to the tribunal.
Mr. Mayor, so if we need to go in the past tense because the application has been approved.
Yeah.
But had it been refused by council, yes, they have appeal rights to the tribunal.
So would that expedite the ability to be able to actually get a policy that meets with the other 443 municipalities in Ontario? And I look to a fellow colleague that does great work with AMO. Maybe he can look and speak to AMO as well. But I'm very nervous of this precedent. So again, would that expedite if they went to the tribunal on this component? Would it expedite policy building or what's correct and what's not correct based on the province? Because they remind us all the time we're creatures of the province, and I'm not going to put a stick in their eye.
So, Mr. Mayor, as I noted, the development application in this case has been approved by council and I believe it's cleared its appeal period. The particular matter at hand is in the nature of a proposed contract between the city and the developer and is not subject to review by the tribunal.
So if we voted down, it's gone forever, they could reapply, or is it just gone?
Mr. Mayor, they have their zoning. So there's nothing for them to reapply for. If it's turned down by council, the contribution is at an end.
Yeah, and that's where I'm trying to square this. Because I would love nothing more than to go into a community meeting and tell 500 people, I'm going to get all this stuff for you guys. I'm going to get everything. Well, that doesn't seem right. I mean, that's great if you want votes in the future, but it's not helpful to getting homes built quickly. So for that reason, I will be supporting the deferral, and we'll see where the conversation takes us on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Kavanaugh?
Thank you, Mayor. I will not be supporting deferral. All the confusion and questions is related to integrity. And yet we clearly have a viewpoint from the Integrity Commissioner that says that that this is okay. This deferral seems to imply that we don't have faith in our Integrity Commissioner, which really appalls me, since this is somebody we bring in for these matters. So I cannot support this deferral. Thank you.
Okay. Let's vote on the deferral motion then, please.
Mr. Mayor, could I just have a couple words to sum up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate that. And I understand the sensitive nature of the conversation. Why do I believe that we should take a cautious approach to this? Well, $300,000 is a significant amount of money, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that both the perception of conflict of interest and a potential conflict of interest are fully mitigated against. I'll reiterate, the memo I received from the Integrity Commissioner said that she ruled that she was not within jurisdiction to make the decision. This will set a precedent. And my first assessment is that it will add an additional layer of opaqueness that will slow down housing development and reduce public insight into the negotiation process with developers. To be clear, as I stated earlier, the whole concept of negotiating a voluntary donation is counterintuitive. A person that donates to the local food cupboard or Parkinson's Research Fund does so voluntarily because they believe in the cause. There is no quid pro quo with that. I have no doubt in my mind at all that should this motion go forward, every councillor around this table is going to be looking for similar arrangements with every development company that's working in their ward. This will delay projects. This is an additional step. This is more red tape when we're trying to reduce that, especially for things like affordable housing. It will likely also lead to increased costs that will then be passed on to tenants and home buyers because the development industry is going to factor this into their business case. We need to be careful and we need to have a proper policy in place. And that's all that I'm asking for with this deferral motion is to say, let's get the policy in place. And then once we have it, we can look at this and other similar types of opportunities for the city. This is not to say we shouldn't take advantage of opportunities for the city, but my concern is there may be a negative second order effect that we're not considering. Constant engagement and discussion regarding ongoing development, it's healthy, it's necessary. I will continue to do it in my ward as well. But to advance this motion right now without a proper policy in place sets a very dangerous precedent. And it is one that we as a city are not under any pressure to take right now. As was indicated, the approval for the application has been done. There's no need for us to make this decision today. It can wait. And if waiting is the right thing to do so that the public trusts us, then I think we should do it. It's for this reason, Mr. Mayor, that I ask that this motion be referred back to council once there is a policy in place that we can base this off of and measure this off of, because I believe that we've all articulated that this is not business as usual. There is in fact a requirement for an appropriate city policy. And this was identified in the last committee by the chair himself, by Councillor Kitts, by Councillor Troster and Carr. And I think it was appropriate to highlight that. So let's just put the two together. I see this as a linear solution. We get the policy in place, then we apply the policy to specific applications of it. And I think we can achieve that in this case. So that's the reason I'm advocating that you support deferral. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hill. Let's vote then, please.
Councillor Johnson?
Deferral? No.
Yep, we're voting on deferral. Just to be clear, we're voting on deferral.
No.
Councillor King?
No.
Councillor Tierney?
Yes.
Councillor Curry?
No.
Councillor Devine?
No.
Councillor Dudas?
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse?
Yes.
Councillor Kitts?
Yes.
Councillor Bradley?
No.
Councillor Brown?
Yes.
Councillor Troster?
No.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Councillor Luloff?
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh?
No.
Councillor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Carr?
No.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Councillor Plante,
No.
Councillor Menard,
No.
Councillor Leeper,
No.
Councillor Gower,
No.
Councillor Lowe,
Yes.
Councillor Hill,
Yes.
Councillor DesRoches,
Oui.
Mayor Sutcliffe,
No.
11 yeas, 14 nays.
Okay. So it's not deferred. So then we will move now to discussion on the motions by Councillor Carr and Councillor Curry. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Mayor. So as I mentioned previously, I did bring a direction to staff at Planning and Housing Committee that was very similar to the motion that Councillor Carr and Kitsa brought forward. So I am supportive of their motion. I'm not supportive of Councillor Curry's motion for a number of reasons. You know, it's my understanding that council has previously approved many memorandums of understanding. These were carried. This was standard practice. My predecessor in Somerset Ward did it with the development on Nepean Street, where residents were being displaced. Capital Ward has done it. My colleague in Kitchissippi has done it many times. The only distinction between this MOU and previous ones is the lack of a special condition through site plan. So if anything, this MOU has less potential persuasion. And this was negotiated after the development already passed site plan. So our legal department has told us that this is acceptable. We have recognized that there's a policy gap, but I do not understand why we're kicking up a fuss about this development right now. Was the previous council simply not paying attention? This was standard practice. It was done all the time. I'll admit where my confusion is now is under the new legal framework of Bill 23, which is why I support asking for more policy on this, because I had a similar situation where a developer was interested in making a contribution towards active transportation that was above and beyond the typical community benefits. And I was told, no, we can't do that anymore. So I think we do need clarity. I think it's really important. But the fact that Councillor Menard was able to make significant gains for his community, I am really offended by the idea that this doesn't pass the sniff test, any implication that there's something shady going on. This is money for traffic calming and for affordable housing. And as I mentioned before, part of why it should be directed to the ward where the development is in is the residents near a particular development are living through the pain of that development being built. I'll give you a perfect example. Kent Street right now is almost entirely low-rise buildings. I have at least 3 very large towers that will be going up in the next 5 years. Those neighbors will be dealing with intense construction, traffic problems, and significant pile driving that'll probably make their teeth shake. Part of this is about developers being able to have a good relationship with the neighbors that they are frankly inconveniencing in order to bring more housing to our community. There is no indication in this proposal that it's delaying the application because the application is absolutely being passed. There is no ethical violation here. And if the issue is allowing councillors to direct funding, I'm not sure why this wouldn't be the same as cash and lieu parkland or previous Section 37 contributions. This was standard practice. And so, you know, all of us around the table, we work very hard to bring projects in our wards forward. And I really get what Councillor Kitts is saying because I was also told no. So I want to know the parameters under which we can say yes, under which we can negotiate additional contributions. But there's nothing about this particular contribution that should be delayed, in my opinion. And I think the real losers in this motion are the community members who would benefit from greater investment and who are seeing what I think is a really ugly side of council here right now. I really have to question why. You know, I put this motion forward to planning committee because Councillor Menard is not on planning committee. I put it on his behalf. And I'm really offended by the implication that there's some sort of ulterior motive and that there was some sort of political pressure that there is no concrete evidence to show that there actually was. So if we're going to conduct reasons debate and deliver community benefit, I really think we should take the committee's recommendation. This came to committee twice. It passed unanimously the second time it came. We sought an ethics commissioner opinion and a legal opinion. So I will be very happy to support the original motion. I'll be happy to support Councillor Carr's motion, but I will not be supporting Councillor Curry's motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and certainly supportive of both of the motions on the table. Similar to Councillor Kitts, I was told no when a development application has already been approved in my ward and there was a particular piece of infrastructure that needs to be changed. It was delayed because of the developer, and when my office was looking for opportunities to enhance temporary traffic calming in the area to continue the community to grow while ensuring the intersection remains safe, we were told no, that it would be inappropriate for the developer to purchase speed boards, as that it would just be inappropriate. And I struggle with that because, you know, what we see on the table, what Councillor Menard was able to negotiate with the developer through this voluntary contribution is something that my community would have benefited from. I just want to ensure that we have a very transparent and open process as to how these come before committee and council. We want to make sure everything is always done in the full light of day. I don't think there is anything untoward that happened here. I just want to make sure that as we move forward, every community is treated fairly, which is why I'll certainly be supporting both of the motions on the table. I would like to say again there, Councillor Curry, I think encapsulated this situation very well. Moving forward, we want to ensure that council is protected, that councillors are protected as they work through these applications with developers. And this is to strengthen the public trust and not detract from it. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to say that I will support Councillor Carr's motion. The amendment, if I can mention that right now, the amendment that I spoke to Councillor Carr about was as part of the consultation of this, I would like to see this, that we also engage the Minister of Municipal Affairs office in this so that we get a picture of what's going on across the province and maybe give them a heads up that under the provincial planning acts and that they may want to have some language in here as well as for municipalities on how to go forward. So I'd like to add that in if everybody supports the amendment. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carr, do you consider that a friendly amendment?
Yes, I think if we include, the consultation is to include the province as well. That is a friendly amendment.
Okay. Okay, I think we have some writing on the screen there. Okay, thank you. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a few thoughts. First on the Curry Plant motion. The MOU dictates how that money is to be spent, right? 2 pots in Capital Ward. The motion here says, no, not Capital Ward, sort of a pot, a general pot at the discretion of the 2 GMs, and it could be citywide. So if you have a development that is amplifying the lack of the sidewalk or the lack of amenities, or they need more trees, the GM's gonna say, no, not the Glebe Canada or Bell's Corners, nowhere near where we actually need to put the money in. And so every development file, at least that comes across my desk in my ward, we look at the immediate area and you ask yourself, how will this development contribute to the community, but further amplify the gaps that exist? And can we address those through a site plan? Can we address those through any other way? That is what our job is. We summarize the concerns we've heard from the public through the planning process, and you try and address them every which way you can through site plan or some other agreement. That's our job. That will always be our job. So I have no problem with the debate whether or not we want to formalize it through a greater policy, but I don't support the Curry Plant motion because it deviates from what the MOU agreement stated. Stated these monies are going to be assigned and directed to Capital Ward. So I don't agree with that. What I have trouble with is the term of donation agreement. And maybe staff can help me. Donation agreement is mentioned in the Curry Plant motion, and then in the Carr Kits motion, we talk about voluntary donations for community benefits, which I interpret that as being somewhat different. So to staff, what is a donation agreement per se? What is the definition of a donation agreement? If developer here agrees to put in traffic calming, we have an agreement. But is a donation agreement a formal signed document? Is it a commitment that once our development is made and the dust settles, we'll come back and we'll beautify the area and we've agreed to this, email and we trust each other. Like, what exactly does that mean as worded in the motion?
Mr. Mayor, my understanding would be it would set forth the terms of the, it could be cash, but it could be other items, the items being donated, how they are to be, when the transfer is to take place, and how they are to be utilized. But it would be a formal agreement, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and this would be outside of a site plan. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and is it cleaner, and would it be a recommendation that all parties try and identify these commitments through a site plan? Is that beneficial to deal with it then and there as opposed to going down some other type of agreement?
Given the voluntary nature of it, it would be my recommendation that this be done outside of the site plan process, Mr. Mayor.
Fair enough. Thank you. Just on the other motion then, Mayor, the car kits motion, the second therefore clause talks about consultation. And I know we've added the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I think that the motion should just say that, be it further resolved that public consultation be included. And that would include the development industry. That would include the FCA and any other party. But the motion specifically stated the development industry, not opposed to them. Obviously, they have things to contribute, but I'm just wondering if the mover would be open to a more generic statement that we need consultation. It should be public consultation. And because right now, as worded, it basically excludes people not being mentioned, and it doesn't mention the word public, which in my mind includes all parties. So if the mover could reflect on that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. I finished reflecting. Councillor Johnson had asked me the same thing, and so I had told her I would be open to that friendly amendment. But thank you for the period of reflection, Councillor Buckington.
So Mayor, just on that note, I guess formally, I'd like to move that the clause read, be it further resolved that public consultation, I guess we could say including the development industry and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and then the rest would stay the same.
Okay, we got that? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. I'll bear with us just 1 second. I apologize.
It's friendly.
It's friendly. Perfect. Okay. Friendly. Thank you very much, Mayor. There's just some questions to whether that was a formal motion. So listen, the province has been very clear that there is a defined universe of benefits that go to benefit the community or to allow for growth to happen. There are CIL, cash in lieu of parkland policies, as well as parkland dedication policies. There are development charges. There are community benefits charges. Those are sort of the big pots that the province has said, these are the funds that when development occurs are going to go into building the infrastructure that is needed in order to sustain the growth. And the growth is having impacts in our communities. For those of us who are maybe a little more central, we're seeing the cheek by jowl nature of a 26-story tower that goes in at the end of the street. Certainly in Kitchissippi, we've been feeling the effects for quite some time. It has traffic impacts. It has impacts with respect to tree loss. It has impacts with respect to loss of green space. There's a lot of impacts that intensification is having. And this council, to its credit, has determined that it's going to proceed with intensification despite some of those challenges. But they are there. And certainly one of the big challenges that we are facing, particularly again in the downtown neighborhoods, is the gentrification effects of intensification. So when, even a 3-story multi-residential unit goes in on what was maybe formerly a rooming house, that's the loss of affordable housing units. And we as a council don't have a lot of tools from the province in order to be able to deal with that. We have those 3 big pots of money. We know that every time we come up with a development charge regime, that is probably going to go to the OLT as developers try to bring those development charges down. Right? They don't want to pay what we consider is necessary in order to support the growth that we see. Our cash or our parkland dedication, if I understand properly, is currently in appeal, right? We tried to get a better deal for residents, and unfortunately, we are not the ones who control that. That is before the Ontario Land Tribunal. We know that the province does not want those additional funds to be a hurdle to development approval. They've been very clear with that, right? We can't use the development review process to try to leverage anything outside of those big pots in order to get the funding that we need in order to achieve a better public realm, in order to offset the loss of affordable housing, in order to get traffic calming and more livable streets. Some developers, and we know that some lawyers and some consultants are telling their clients, don't give a nickel. This is what you owe the city. Do not provide anything over and above. But developers are also meeting with the community through the course of those consultations. They're hearing directly from residents about the impacts that residents are concerned those developments are going to have. And they're talking with councillors about what the impacts are that those developments are going to have. And some of them, to their credit, are saying, you know what? The residents who are going to live in this neighborhood deserve to live in a great neighborhood. The residents who already live in the neighborhood don't deserve to be unduly impacted by the development that we are proposing. Here is some small contribution that we are willing to make over and above what is strictly required by the law. And when those developers are acting in that good faith, maybe it's a piece of public realm that the city's not going to build. There's no funding available to make it kick ass. But a little bit additional contribution from a developer can make sure that it is a great piece of public realm. There are times when developers are willing to invest in making our communities better. And when they do, we should be grateful for that because we don't have the leverage to force it. I'm not suggesting that we should be approving MOUs that are not voluntary on the part of developers. But when it is voluntary, let's not throw those wrenches in the works. I am more than happy to support this MOU, which is hopefully going to offset the gentrification effects of this building going in and the increased traffic that's going to go in that neighborhood. I am also extremely keen that the control of how voluntary agreements are negotiated continues to remain the beneficiaries determined in consultation with the councillors. Right? We're not talking about offsetting the traffic impact of this Catassa development in Canada, right? There's a very immediate local impact that needs to be done, and it is the local councillor who is working with the local community who understand what those local impacts are going to be. We don't need to say, okay, GM, here's a pot of money that's available for you to do traffic calming at some other place in the community.
That's time, Councillor.
Recognize the experience of the local councillor. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dudas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is such a difficult conversation, and it's uncomfortable. And I think our residents need to know that when we're approving or rejecting a development application, it's solely based on the merits of that application. And any exchange, big or small, of money muddies those waters. We don't have a policy on this. We've kind of been flying by the seat of our pants. And yes, MOUs have been signed in the past. But when I think of the development process and when staff are starting an application with a prospective developer, they're talking about what that development needs to fit into that community. Now, I would argue sometimes I don't agree with staff. I don't feel that it suits the infill requirements of that community. I have my own developments of that. But I've been told in my own right, as I've heard from other my colleagues, that for me to ask for a sidewalk to be added to Navan Road because there's thousands of houses being built by a particular development is inappropriate for me to do so. So I beg and I plead for a little extra asphalt just to put in some area so somebody could walk and not get struck by a car. And I'm not even allowed to ask for that, but maybe or maybe not, they might do it. It is not being fairly applied. Now, I would say, and I'm going to say it again, I think that this MOU was done in good faith. I don't think there was anything nefarious about it, but it wasn't done publicly. There was no Engage Ottawa page that was put up that said, public, what would you like to see out of this? And I don't believe that when we walk into a room as a counselor, that doesn't come with some level of authority, that doesn't influence a discussion. So when we walk into a room and we sit down across from a developer, if we say we would like to see this and they say yes, how does that not influence the process? We don't know if it did or not. We need to extricate ourselves from this. That's why I am very, very comfortable with Councillor Curry's motion about making it citywide. I'm comfortable with letting staff do the job they're supposed to do, which is have delegated authority and say, listen, we need a front-ending agreement to put a traffic signal in at La Marche, because we need to get this done to get so staff are doing that work to try to mitigate infill. It might not be exactly what we want. It might not be the pickleball court next door. It might not be the traffic speed camera thing that we want everything. And don't get me wrong, I would love to accept all sorts of money to improve the situation in my community. But I can't walk away from that and say that didn't influence my decision on a development application. I know deep down it doesn't, but how do you prove that to your community? And I'm saying this, that in the absence of a policy, I cannot support this MOU today. And I want to, and I deeply believe that it was done with all good intents. But I do not want in a couple of weeks from now or a year from now or anything to be those conversations about being in the developer's pocket or we're influenced by developers. We're not. We're supposed to be looking at the values and the merits of an application based on that and that alone. And we're supposed to trust our staff to do their job based on the legislative legal requirements that the province determines that we have to follow. So that being said, I think that for me, it's almost straightforward. As much as I would love to believe that it was convoluted, I cannot support this MOU. I will be supporting the Carr motion, the Curry motion, and I desperately need us to have a policy in place so we don't go through this again.
Thank you, Councillor Dudas. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I'll just say I'm going to support the Carr Kits motion. I appreciate that there needs to be a policy discussion on this and certainly want to support that motion. In terms of MOUs that have been supported by this council unanimously, we've had MOUs in 2022, in 2021, in 2020, supported unanimously by this council repeatedly for Herringate, for Bank and Riverside, and for other developments. We also have regular negotiations that have gone on prior to Bill 23 through site plan. That means there might be more trees added. It might be a wider sidewalk. It might be a bike lane that gets added there. There might be more green space. See, cash in lieu is part of that. But through site plan, those discussions happen regularly between councillors. Now that's happening regularly with staff. I think it just goes to show you that we all have a job to do, and our job is to work for our communities in their best interests with integrity. And that's what's happened in this case. With regard to the Curry motion, I think we need to split it in two, Mayor. There's two parts of that. There's the first, be it resolved, which is directly related to the discussions and negotiations in good faith within my community prior to any policy being in place, prior to having this direction in the second part of the motion. So their understanding is, hey, here's the draft MOU. We're agreeing to make a voluntary contribution around traffic calming and affordable housing. Because the communities asked for those things, and there was an Engage Ottawa, it was dev apps, but lots of comments came in there for these several developments. It's not just this one development. There's others in Glebe Annex and other land here with this developer, which is why they're listening to community in this way. And so I think if you want to have a policy debate about the second portion of the Curry motion, fair enough. But when this was discussed and voluntary contributions were agreed to, that was before any of that direction was there. If it was in place then we would have made that very clear, but it wasn't. And so how can you go back now and say, okay, well, we're going to put this in a different light, and maybe they pull the funding as a result. I mean, I might, if you're that developer, because it's not going to the contribution of the ward where they said they would want it to go, right? So it makes sense to split these up. The first be it resolved and the second be it resolved. I have no problem supporting the second one, so that at least we have some parameters moving forward to midterm governance. But to cast aspersions on the good work that's been done thus far, the negotiations and discussions that have happened with community, which has been happening regularly, repeatedly. I don't know if everyone has been doing it here, but certainly our office has, many other offices, you know, Jean Cloutier previously, there's been offices that have done this regularly because you know what your community needs. That's all that we were putting forward at that time. So, and you know, in the future, I'm open to like a CIL type policy. I know it's 60-40, there's 50-50, but that's a policy discussion. We have that debate at policy discussion. And I'll just say, you know, there's a site right now at Bank and Chamberlain, badly needed affordable housing in that area, right at close to Centertown, where there's not a lot of affordable housing. It's sitting there, it's a parking lot. And through the Bank Street Height and Character Study, that has been identified by city staff as needed affordable housing. That's been discussed through that process as well. Same with that traffic coming. You all know Bronson and Carlin. You've all been through there. It's not the best place to drive, walk, bike. It's not great. So there needs to be improvements eventually. There will be, and of course, through the Glebe Annex area in Dow's Lake, there's new development happening with the hospital and other areas. So, look, I'll support the car kits motion. I'm going to support the second portion of Councillor Curry's motion because I think it makes sense. But in the negotiations that happen in good faith with integrity, that should pass here, and we should move on with the policy as we've done in 2022, 2021, 2020, and prior to this. So I'll leave it there, Mayor. Thanks, and just ask for those separation of those two clauses.
Thank you. Councillor Plante.
Oui, j'ai une question pour Maître Mark. Do you want me to ask in English?
I did not bring my headphones with me. I
Oh,
apologize.
it's okay. Don't worry.
Mayor.
And I apologize. I'm just finding a bit of this discussion a little confusing and a bit over my head. But is there a way in which, and again, this may go back to what Councillor Minal was referring as a policy discussion, but is there a way in which we could have sort of the traffic calming aspect stay in his ward and then the affordable aspect percentage go citywide?
Mr. Mayor, this is a voluntary contribution. And so CATASA has a say. Could language be inserted that as part of council approval? Such is open to council, Mr. Mayor.
So would I have to do a friendly amendment? Is that, sorry, I just need a bit of direction here.
It is up, of course, to the mover and the seconder as to whether or not the amendment is friendly. As a technical matter, can recommendation one be directed to be ward specific, whereas recommendation 2 is citywide? As a technical matter, yes, it can. CATASA has a say as to whether or not that is acceptable.
Okay. Can I ask a question of the ward councillor? Councillor Minal, would you be amenable to that?
So my worry is that there's going to be no money left at the end of the day here because we're changing this on the fly and it's not what's been agreed to previously.
Okay.
And so that's my concern with this. I'm fully, as I say, to the second portion of the Curry motion, fully amenable to that. The first portion, though, before any direction or policy was in place with this, was negotiated in good faith, and that should remain there. So that's my direction, and happy to support the other portions here so that we can come together on this thing. We all want a good policy in place. And I'll also just say right now, Councillor, it is the discretion of the general manager. It's written in the MOU and in the original motion that the affordable housing is at the discretion of the general manager under our MOU in motion.
Okay.
That's already under their discretion. It's already their delegated authority.
Okay, sorry. And then I have one more question for Clara. So my understanding is for the affordable housing projects that we have in the city, there's sort of a list that we're going down the line to fund, right? And I know you're saying you have the parking lot that you really want to turn into affordable housing, and that's great, but the city does have a list of affordable housing projects that we have prioritized, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Merci, Councillor Plante. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to underscore my concerns from a broader perspective of what this specific decision could mean in terms of precedent within the city on development applications and with regard to our overall housing policies writ large. We have said since the get-go that we need to develop more housing, be it market rate, be it affordable. This process I cannot see go forward without adding a layer of process to every development that we have, potentially adding cost to it as well. And I'll just highlight in the letter that we received this morning from the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association, quote, while GOBA refrains from commenting on individual projects, the association is deeply troubled by the potential precedent that this may establish and its direct impact on the integrity of the development process. I think we should be concerned. We need to have a policy in place before we move forward with significant dollar value voluntary contributions. I think it's that straightforward, and for that reason, I will not be supporting the motion that came forward this morning, but I'll be supporting the two amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Carr, is it your intention to wrap up? Is that what you're doing here?
Yes, if I could ask a point of clarification on Curry Plant motion beforehand. I could combine the two.
Yep. But if that's the
But
case.
Councillor Tierney has his hands up, so I'll
Yeah,
go at the
and
end.
I had a question as well, which I'll do before we go back to you, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Councillor Tierney.
Great. I also wrestle with this one because I don't like the idea of precedent setting, and even the mention of, well, maybe Takasa won't like this because it was originally structured for a certain area. They could pull out. That's concerning because that makes it specific and siloed and doesn't allow our professional staff to be able to invest that money for the best return on investment, housing, whatever the case may be. So for that reason, I won't support the original, but I certainly will be supporting Kathy on that. I find it concerning if we're splitting the vote based on where. That's of concern to me. I think we all have to collectively work together. We said at the beginning of the meeting. And the only way to make that happen is to support the motion in its entirety, both parts. We need to be able to get a policy in place. And I feel a little bad for Takasa. I think they may have, I've never dealt with them before. I think they may have painted themselves in the corner a little bit. I'm sure they've heard from many others in the industry. You mentioned GOBA. There's a grave concern. This will be precedent setting. I don't want people showing up, and I have the highest number of high-rise towers going in. I have a ton of applications, and I don't want people coming to me, well, look what happened here. That creates a divide where our focus should be on our housing emergency, not about how beautiful a sidewalk is. Those are all great to haves, but it's never, you have to determine, do we have a beautification emergency? Probably not. So I think we should focus on, if they want to make this voluntold contribution, that we have to make sure it's in a global pot at a minimum till we have some kind of policy put in place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask staff to comment on the precedent setting notion, because I recall a number of years ago now that there was a development in Gloucester Southgate Ward where there was a phase 1 of a subdivision and a phase 2. And we were looking to put, using CIL, a splash pad in a local park. And the councillor at the time negotiated with the developer to pay for the water hookup. They were under no obligation to do so, but saw benefit in investing in a community in which they were going to continue to develop, because having a splash pad in a local park obviously has high value for the residents and future residents who would move into their development. So if staff could comment on the precedent setting nature of this type of an agreement, whether it's in an MOU as we see it before us today, or through a site plan commitment, I think that would be helpful, because I don't actually think this is precedent setting. And so I think there's a bit of conflation going on here. So perhaps planning staff could weigh in on that piece.
Mr. Mayor, I am aware of such things having occurred in the past. I believe it would benefit, such a scenario moving forward would indeed benefit from what's being proposed in the motion being brought by Councillor Carr and Councillor Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. And I agree that having some guidelines around this type of agreement is beneficial, but I guess I didn't really hear, you're aware of other agreements. Is this precedent setting? Is an agreement where a developer goes above and beyond what they're required to do under the legislation precedent setting?
Mr. Mayor, it's voluntary and therefore, in my opinion, it is not precedent setting because any particular applicant in any particular case is free to say no.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. I think that's good clarity for us around the table. I don't think that this is a precedent-setting agreement. I think that it makes sense that a developer who's developing in an area wants to make sure that the community has the benefits that future residents would want to see when choosing where they might want to purchase or rent in housing. So I just don't think it's fair to characterize this as a precedent-setting agreement that we've never seen before, and that it's opening a door to, this is going to be every time an application comes forward, developers are going to be expected to provide a voluntary contribution. And I think it's also a good reminder to, in this case, this application is already approved. This was negotiated after the approval. So there was no pressure that perhaps this application wouldn't be approved if they didn't volunteer to make this type of contribution. So I think that's also a good reminder. So I don't think this is precedent setting. I think this is that Councilor Menard has done his job for his community, and he's represented his community well, and he was able to negotiate a deal. And I've also heard, if it's a swing set, it's fine, but if it's $300,000, it's not fine. So is it the principle that we're debating, or is it the amount? Like, I'm just really confused here. I think that separating the two articles in the motion is fine, but I think that Councilor Menard has done his job, and that the community is expecting these traffic improvements and affordable housing in the neighborhood is a good thing for all of us, and that we should approve the original MOU as it's presented before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Just before we go back to Councillor Carr, I had a couple of questions. So just to be clear, though, Mr. Mark, you're saying it's not precedent setting from the perspective of the city, but we can't know whether it's precedent setting in terms of the perception of developers. Is that fair to say? If developers feel that that there is an expectation on the part of the city, even if the wording is that it's voluntary, we can't know what their interpretation of this would be. Is that fair to say?
Mr. Mayor, in the staff involvement on this file, the message has, to my knowledge, been consistent that this is voluntary. And that certainly was communicated in the memo that was provided and was communicated in responses that were given at committee. So that word has been clearly used. If a developer has a different understanding after having heard that term used consistently, it is possible, Mr. Mayor, but the word voluntary has been used by staff consistently in addressing this matter.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying on the in terms of how it's perceived in the community, we can't control that. I just wanted to ask either the city manager or the interim director of planning on if Councillor Curry's motion passes it in its entirety. I presume that the city would work with the donor, the contributor, to proceed with a contribution that would make sense for them and make sense for the city, which would include the possibility of it being what it was originally intended for. Is that fair to say? In other words, you're not just going to go back to the contributor and say, we've decided to use the money somewhere else and put at risk the contribution. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, Mr. Mayor. They have the intention, where the money was to go and how it was to be spent. It's their gift.
So even if Councillor Curry's motion passes, you would work with the contributor to allocate the money in a way that they saw benefit as the voluntary contributor.
We would have that discussion.
Yeah.
And if there are other projects, I may bring it up. But it's their contribution, and we will work together with them.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just say, for my own part, I am concerned about the perceptions around this. I have no questions about about any specific agreement, but I don't like the optics that are created by these kinds of agreements. And so I think, and in the absence of any specific policy. I think the dynamics are such that when everything is done fairly and voluntarily, some people may perceive otherwise. I would underscore again that the Integrity Commissioner did not bless this particular agreement. The Integrity Commissioner said only that it was not her jurisdiction and that it was a matter of policy. So I think we need to be mindful of that. So I am very supportive of Councillor Carr's motion to develop a policy. And I think that will provide more clarity going forward for everyone and provide, frankly, protection for councillors from allegations that there is something unfair or involuntary about future contributions that are made. So I will be supporting Councillor Carr's motion. I will also be supporting Councillor Curry's motion. Councillor Carr, did you want to wrap up on your motion?
Yes. I think our discussion today illustrates the fact that we need to have a policy in place.
Okay, so there's been a request to vote separately on the two be it resolved items in the Curry motion. So we'll start by voting on the first half of the Curry motion, please.
Councillor Johnson,
Yes.
Councillor King,
Yes.
Councillor Tierney,
Yes.
Councillor Curry,
Yes.
Councillor Devine,
No.
Councillor Dudas,
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse,
Yes.
Councillor Kitts,
Yes.
Councillor Bradley,
No?
Councillor Brown,
Yes.
Councillor Troster,
No.
Councillor Brockington.
No.
Councillor Luloff.
Yep.
Councillor Kavanaugh,
No.
Councillor Kelly,
Yes.
Councillor Carr,
Yes.
Councillor Hubley,
Yes.
Councillor Plante,
No.
Councillor Menard,
No.
Councillor Leeper,
Nope.
Councillor Gower.
No.
Councillor Lowe,
No.
Councillor Hill,
No.
Councillor DeRoche,
Yes.
Mayor Sutcliffe,
Yes.
14 yeas, 11 nays.
Okay. On the second half of the Curry motion then, is that carried or does it?
I would like to dissent on that.
Okay, so okay, recorded vote then?
Yeas and nays, please.
Yep, on the second half of the Curry motion, please.
Councillor Johnson,
I realize now I didn't vote right on the first one, but I will vote no on the second one to make up for it.
Councillor King,
Yes.
Councillor Tierney,
Yes.
Councillor Curry,
Yes.
Councillor Devine,
No.
Councillor Dudas,
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse,
Yes.
Councillor Kitts,
Yes.
Councillor Bradley,
No?
Councillor Brown,
Yes.
Councillor Troster,
No.
Councillor Brockington,
No.
Councillor Luloff,
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh,
No.
Councillor Kelly,
Yay.
Councillor Carr,
Yes.
Councillor Hubley, Councillor Plante,
Oui.
Councillor Menard,
Yes.
Councillor Leeper,
Yes.
Councillor Gower,
Yes.
Councillor Lowe,
Yes.
Councillor Hill,
No.
Councillor DeRoche,
Yes.
Mayor Sutcliffe,
Yes.
18 yeas, 7 nays.
Okay, that's carried. And now on the Carr motion, please. Is that carried?
Carried.
Okay, that's carried. And then on, if we could do a recorded vote on the motion as amended, please.
Counselor Johnson,
Now we're voting on item 14.1 motion memorandum of understanding with Catassa Group as amended by the two motions that we just carried. The
So,
two motions that we just carried.
Yes.
Counselor King,
Yes.
Counselor Tierney,
No.
Counselor Curry,
No.
Counselor Devine,
Yes.
Counselor Dudas,
No.
Counselor DeRusse,
No.
Counselor Kitts,
Yes.
Counselor Bradley,
Yes.
Counselor Brown,
No.
Counselor Troster,
Yes.
Counselor Brockington, Counselor Luloff,
No.
Counselor Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Counselor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Carr,
Yes.
Counselor Hughley,
No.
Counselor Plante,
We.
Counselor Menard,
Yes.
Counselor Leeper,
We.
Counselor Gower,
Yes.
Counselor Lowe.
No.
Sorry. Counselor Hill,
No.
Counselor DeRoche.
No.
Mayor Sutcliffe,
Yes.
15 yeas, 10 nays.
Okay, carried. Item 18, motions of which notice has already been given. We have the motion on the Ottawa International Airport Authority tree planting. Councillor Brockington, did you want to speak to that? Or we can just go right to other people?
No, I'll have an introduction. The main message in the book, 3 Cups of Tea, is that by sitting down together over a cup of tea, we can tackle any obstacle, any challenges we have over tea, developed a personal bond that allows us to tackle even the most challenging of subjects. The motion before us today is a simple request. Given the recent clear cutting of a pine plantation on Hunt Club Road, under the authority of the airport, the focus of 2 years of acrimony and distress in the community, council is being asked to endorse a request to replace those trees by planting others. The motion does not prescribe how or where or what species, simply to plant more trees. Council placed a high standard on the Ottawa Hospital when it went through multiple site plan rounds, including for the parking garage currently under construction. For trees being removed at this location, they agreed to replace them on a 5-to-1 ratio. When the Taggart Algonquin Consortium removed a forested area on their lands with no heads up to the local councillor or community, people were justifiably angry and called into question the permissions that were granted after the fact, no less. Imagine how much confrontation we can avoid in the city over a cup of tea. The airport recently asked, why are local residents so angry? The simple answer is, you have not accepted repeated requests to join the community for a conversation. You've been asked by local councillors. You've been asked by the local member of parliament. You've been asked by a city council motion the last term of council. We've asked, share your strategic vision, share your short, medium, long-term plans. Let's have a professional conversation about the airport and local issues. Every other group honors these types of requests. Why is the airport so silent? Imagine how we can actually work together if we only had a cup of tea together. I acknowledge the airport's authority to remove the trees. However, this property was a cherished area for many, a place for both physical and mental solace. And with the city's focus on the tree canopy, tree protection bylaw, and focus on tree retention and replacement when trees are removed, when under the authority of the city, it seems very reasonable that after this journey, we would make a simple request of the airport to, at their discretion, working with the city or other partners, to replant trees that have recently been taken. And that's why, Mayor, this motion on behalf of the community, 22,000 people who have signed petition regarding this parcel of land is put before council today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Bradley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to Councillor Brockington. Up until the last election, the Hunt Club Forest was entirely in River Ward, but it is now in Gloucester Southgate Ward. So I appreciate all the work that he's done to date to try and save the forest. Ultimately, it was clear cut in December, and that was devastating for the community. The motion, again, as Councillor Brockington highlighted, it's a very simple request. You've taken down the trees. Please replace them somewhere else at your discretion. We have an urban tree canopy target as a city under our new official plan of 40%. That's what we say is needed to combat the impacts of climate change. And so since we've taken out over 10,000 trees, the very least they can do is plant them, but it does not condone the clear cutting. And I hope that the airport would consider developing this land as a public park in the future, but that's a different discussion. This is simply saying you've taken down 10,000 mature trees. At the very least, could you plant 10,000 more trees somewhere else so that we can help to achieve our 40% target of an urban tree canopy as part of the official plan that we approved. So I hope that this is just an easy support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Desroches.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to support the motion in principle, and I do represent a constituency that is the neighbor of the airport, so I'm sensitive to their development and their decisions, which in some cases don't benefit the local community. And so I'm going to support this in principle. But over T, it is an airport. They do have sensitivities around airport operations, in particular birds and what have you. So just communication with the public. I think if they are going to do this, that there may be situations where safety has to be paramount. And I think we have to accept that they do have vacant lands, but there will potentially be areas where we have to be sensitive to the airport operations. So again, I'm going to support it in principle, but you know, there may be some limitations in terms of what we can do, but let's hear from them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is the motion carried?
I dissent, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Couple of dissents. Okay, thank you. Sorry, let's go back to item 17, motion to adopt reports. Councillor Brockington, if you wouldn't mind introducing that, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. That the Built Heritage Report 10, Planning and Housing Committee Reports 18A and 20, and the report from the city clerk entitled Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for Items Subject to the Planning Act Explanation Requirements at the City Council meeting of December 6, 2023 be received and adopted as amended.
Is that carried? Okay, motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. There is a motion regarding waiver of demolition control, which I believe is of a time-sensitive nature. Conseiller Plante. So on suspension of the rules, is that carried? Conseiller Plante.
Whereas the building on the parcel of land known as 140 St. Paul Street is owned by 13739-104 Canada Inc. And whereas the building is currently vacant following a fire on January 31st, 2014. And whereas 2 additional fires happened in 2023. And whereas a qualified engineer with Ainley Group performed a close-up inspection of 140 St. Paul and submitted a report to the City of Ottawa, which identified the building as uninhabitable, a risk to adjacent structures and the public, whereas the report was recommended immediate demolition, and whereas the residential use building is subject to demo control, which is an application process that can take up to 98 days for a decision plus post-approval requirements, and whereas given the unique circumstances, waiving demolition control will permit the site to be made safe for the public, and whereas by waiving demolition control, the city will not receive $5,339.42, which is also the fee associated with demolition control application. Therefore, be it resolved that council waive demolition control approval and allow the owners to proceed directly to seek demolition permit for the safe removal of the building at 140 St. Paul. Merci.
Merci, Conseiller Plante. Is the motion carried?
Carried.
Okay, thank you.
It's bad.
All right, Councillor Gower has a motion regarding the brownfield redevelopment community improvement plan, which is, Councillor Plante, your mic is still on. Your mic is still on. There we go. So in order to provide clarity on the path forward for the brownfield CIP, including existing applications, and to give staff sufficient time to prepare the necessary reports on suspension of the rules, is that carried? Councillor Gower?
Okay, thank you. Where it is anticipated that staff will bring forward reports to the Finance and Corporate Services Committee and Council in April 2024 to implement the Affordable Housing CIP and the other changes to the city's community improvement plans approved by Council on November 22nd, 2023, through the City of Ottawa Community Improvement Plan Program Review Report. And whereas it would be appropriate for clarification on the brownfield CIP program to be provided at the same time as the Affordable Housing CIP to help ensure alignment of reporting and implementation. Therefore, be it resolved that the following motion be tabled and referred to Finance and Corporate Services Committee for consideration at its meeting of April 2nd, 2023. Whereas Council paused the brownfield CIP program on December 14, 2022 until such time as a review was undertaken to be considered by Council, and whereas Council considered proposed changes to the brownfields and other CIP programs on November 22nd, 2023, and whereas during deliberations, recommendation 7, which would have made changes to the brownfield CIP as outlined in the staff report, was not approved by Council, and whereas the approval of recommendation 3 and non-approval of recommendation 7 also results in a $5 million cap where there is a stacking of applications under 2 or more community improvement plans, including brownfields community improvement plans, but no cap where the application is only under the brownfields community improvement plan. And whereas recommendation 8 as amended directed staff to bring forward the 7 complete applications that were received prior to the pause under the program as it was in place when they applied was ultimately not approved by Council. And whereas recommendation 9, which directed staff to amend the brownfields repayment provisions as detailed in the staff report, was approved by Council. And whereas this split approval has introduced some operational complexity and there's a need for clarity to be provided, therefore be it resolved that the 2015 Brownfields Redevelopment Community Improvement Plan program be amended to include the following changes. The repayment be based on 75% of property tax uplift for applications that qualify under the Affordable Housing CIP, or up to 100% of both affordable and in a PMTSA to encourage faster development near transit. The repayment be based on 50% of property tax uplift for applications that include housing but do not qualify under the Affordable Housing CIP. Projects without a housing component are not eligible. The maximum eligible grant for standalone brownfield redevelopment CIP application be capped at $3 million. The maximum eligible grant for a brownfield redevelopment CIP application stacked with any other CIP program with the exception of the Affordable Housing CIP be capped at $5 million. Eliminate repayment of non-remediation related costs, including building demolition, feasibility studies, upgrades to on-site infrastructure as detailed in the report. Eliminate the Municipal Leadership Strategy Program, a 20-year limit on the repayment of eligible costs. Any funding approval will become null and void if a building permit is not issued within 18 months post-council approval of the brownfields application. Be it further resolved that the 7 deemed complete applications as described in the City of Ottawa CIP program report be considered by Finance and Corporate Services Committee and Council under the rules and criteria prior to the program pause in December 2022. And be it further resolved that staff be directed to bring forward the 7 deemed complete applications for committee and council consideration at the same Finance and Corporate Services Committee meeting. Thank you. So quickly, I thank you to the mayor and his team for collaborating on this and for city staff who obviously assisted greatly with the wording. This is a follow-up to the memo that the mayor sent, I believe just before the holiday break, and committing to come back as early as possible to council with the path forward on the brownfield CIP. It needs to be considered as part of a public meeting, and it does make sense to link that to the Affordable Housing CIP, which will be in front of us in April. So this is intended to give some broad strokes direction as to what that may look like and give ample time to all stakeholders and councillors to give this consideration before we come back to debate this at committee in April. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gowan. Thank you for your help and cooperation on this. And just to be clear, we are we would be approving that this motion that you read out within the motion would be tabled and referred to Finance Corporate Services, just to be clear. Councillor Luloff.
So would it be inappropriate to ask questions about the content of that motion that would be moving forward at this time? Should we wait until a later date?
I would, yeah, I mean, I think it would be better to have that discussion at the finance corp, as long as you're okay with it going to the finance and corporate. The thing we're discussing today is simply whether it's going to the finance and corporate services.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hill.
I think this is a similar question, but I just want to make sure the content that we are going to approve today is not new or changed content. This is simply procedural, because my concern being that we could have done a notice of motion today and then had 2 weeks to talk about this and think about it and then talk about it on the 7th. But the rationale behind doing this today is, if you could just confirm that for me, because I just want to make sure I'm not rushed. I feel rushed.
Sure.
Essentially, this is giving us 10 weeks notice of motion before it comes to committee. And the intention was to follow up on the mayor's memo that at the first opportunity at council, we would be providing some kind of an update or information about the path forward on CIP.
Okay, is that clear? Okay, thank you. Thanks for those clarifying questions, though. Appreciate it. Is that carried? Okay, thank you. Notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move with Councillor Johnson seconding regarding the social and economic prosperity review. Whereas nearly a third of municipal spending in Ontario is for services in areas of provincial responsibility, and expenditures are outpacing provincial contributions by nearly 4 billion per year. Whereas municipal revenues such as property taxes do not grow with the economy or inflation. Whereas unprecedented population and housing growth will require significant investments in municipal infrastructure. Whereas municipalities are being asked to take on complex health and social challenges like homelessness, supporting asylum seekers, and addressing the mental health and addictions crises. And whereas inflation, rising interest rates, and provincial policy decisions are sharply constraining municipal fiscal capacity. Whereas property taxpayers, including people on fixed incomes and small businesses, cannot afford to subsidize income redistribution programs for those most in need. Whereas the province of Ontario can and should invest more in the prosperity of communities, and whereas municipalities and the provincial government have a strong history of collaboration. Therefore, be it resolved that the mayor, on behalf of City Council, be directed to write to the Provincial Minister of Finance to encourage the province, in collaboration with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, to undertake a comprehensive social and economic prosperity review to promote the stability and sustainability of municipal finances across Ontario. And happy to debate this at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas the Ottawa Police Services Board, the board is comprised of the mayor, 2 members of council, 3 provincially appointed members, and a council appointed public member in accordance with the Police Services Act. Whereas on December 7th, 2022, council approved motion 2203-21 to provide an increase in the honorarium for a public member of the Ottawa Police Services Board who is elected as chair to $54,000 to be funded from the existing honorarium and the council administration budget credit that would otherwise go to the constituency services budget of a member of council who was elected as chair of the board. And whereas the council appointed public member who served as chair of the board unexpectedly resigned in December 2023, and a recruitment process is now underway to fill the vacant council appointed public member position. And whereas the board is required to elect a chair and vice chair at its first meeting of each calendar year in accordance with the Police Services Act, as well as the board's procedure bylaw. And whereas at its January 22nd, 2024 meeting, the Ottawa Police Services Board elected one of the provincially appointed members, Salim Fakarani, as chair. And whereas motion 2022-03-21 approved in December 2022 applies only to a council appointed public member elected as chair. And whereas the position of chair of the Police Services Board is one of significant responsibility requiring a substantial personal commitment of time and resources, therefore be it resolved that eligibility for the enhanced honorarium provided to a council-appointed public member serving as chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board be extended to the provincially appointed members, effective upon that member's appointment as chair of the board.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. And I'll just I'll point out, I think there's a typo in the name of the chair who was pointed out. We'll fix that for next time. I'm not aware of any other notices of motion. So motion to introduce bylaws. Councillor Brockington.
Mayor, that the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings, be read and passed.
Is that carried? Confirmation bylaw. Councillor Brockington.
Mayor, that the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of January 24th, 2024.
Is that carried? I believe there is an inquiry from Councillor Hughley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, well, I'll read it out and then I'll explain it. The mayor recently created the Emergency Shelter Crisis Task Force headed up by Councillor Dudas to address the current housing shortage in Ottawa, and we are doing what we can with current resources. However, in the news recently, Toronto is reporting as asking the federal government for $250 million to cover the shortfall needed to help with housing refugees and asylum seekers, otherwise known as the federal levy. Can staff please tell us how much federal funding is needed to cover the cost for Ottawa, or that Ottawa will be incurring to house refugees and asylum seekers for 2024 and 2025, if projected costs are available, so that council will be able to consider this as not part of our next budget discussion, but also in case we have to do something in the interim.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor, that the proceedings of the city council meeting of January 24th, 2024 be adjourned.
Is that carried? Merci beaucoup. Thank you.